So, welcome everyone to our Thursday evening class. And for those of you who may be new to meditation, I would just like to give a little bit of an introduction by saying that meditation is increasingly in demand with all the people who lead their hectic lives as a way to gain some sense of balance and relaxation after having had our attention held hostage by so many other busy things going on in our lives all day long. It's all very well being attentive to the things around us, but at the end of the day, often we feel that we've become quite drained of our mental energy. And meditation is proposed as a way to somehow to give some rest and recharging of our mental energy by doing a simple but very revolutionary thing, which is to reunite body and mind in the same place. Because so much of the day, when we focus our attention on other things, it's like our whole awareness has been pulled away from where we are physically. So putting body and mind back together again helps to restore the quality of the mind again. And there are some places which are particularly effective for getting back that sense of balance in the mind. And the place you can see on this diagram is somewhere down on the level of the solar plexus, or in the middle of your diaphragm if you like, where if you could realign your awareness at that point, then body and mind would get the maximum benefit for recharging the mental energy. How exactly you'd get your mind to go there? Well, you can do it in a traditional sense by putting your awareness on your breath, because the breath goes in and out within the space of the body, like a column of air all the way down from your nose down to a point where it turns around briefly before going out again, which is right down on the diaphragm there. But an even simpler way, which I normally recommend for those who are new to meditation, is to use a stationary focus for your attention rather than a moving one, by picking a place on the pathway of your breath. So if you were to pick the point where the breath turns around between coming in and going out, and keep your mind solely at that place, then it will be the most relaxing way of meditating. And the way that's traditionally done is to imagine some sort of visual object, such as a picture of the sun shining, if you can think of that, and bring it to that point inside you. And by maintaining your mind with that picture, not letting it wander away, then your mind will remain in contact with that point and get that sense of relaxation gradually coming through. For some people it's less of a visual object, more of a tactile one, so you may feel that point rather than seeing it. So if you have to be one of those people, don't worry too much about that. And if you have a lot of thoughts coming up in the mind, as many people do, especially those who have problems sleeping, or perhaps further than that to things like panics or anxiety, where you have a real where your mind is overrun with thoughts, then the same thing may happen in your meditation. Generally, to get a quiet mind when meditating, while we're focused at the center, we can try our best to ignore the thoughts, and generally they will gradually die down by themselves. But if that's not working for you, you may be interested to experiment with this mantra, the words you can see there on the screen, Samma Arahang, hearing the sound of those words as if they come up silently in a resonant way from the center of your body. So you'd be doing two things. In the case you're using a mantra, keeping your mind with that inner object, but also hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang coming up over and over again until the thoughts die down a little bit more easily. And if you prefer to substitute in your own mantra, then you are quite welcome to do that. It may be more memorable for you. Yeah. So generally any meditation starts out with about 5 minutes relaxing our physical sense of comfort first of all, and then moving on to relax our state of mind. And only then do we do this exercise with bringing our mind to some sort of focus at the center of our body and using the mantra if necessary. The way we sit for meditation can be in the half lotus position if we were sitting on a meditation mat, in which case the right leg would be up on the calf of the left leg. But if you're sitting on a chair, then it's perfectly acceptable just to sit up fairly straight and not bolt upright, but at least upright enough to be able to breathe fully and also to find the center of your body with ease. The way to put the hands together ideally is with the right hand on top of the left hand, and the index finger of the right hand goes up against the thumb of the left hand. And our hands just rest palm upwards in our lap. And that's a little device to give you advance warning if ever you should get sleepy while meditating, because your finger tends to slip out of place, giving you a little bit of advance warning. Yeah. But if you feel more comfortable just resting your hands in any other way, that's also quite fine. You will notice that comfort is the name of the game for meditation. So we'll sit with meditation for about 40 minutes. And afterwards, then I'll move on to the topic of the lecture for today, which is on humility. So if you'd like to settle yourself down into a comfortable position for your meditation today, closing your eyes very gently and breathing deeply to yourself, while letting go of any tensions in your body, all the way from the top of your head, right the way down to the tips of your toes. And in this body scan of ours, we can allow the muscles of our face to become soft, taking care that even the way we've closed our eyes is as gentle as possible. Bearing in mind that the muscles around our eyes are the most sensitive in our body. And if we can close our eyes gently, then the whole of the rest of our body will relax in just the same way. So we allow that wave of relaxation to pass down through our face to our neck and shoulders, relaxing all the muscles there. Relaxing both arms, forearms, hands and fingers, so that the way our hands rest in our lap should feel as light and gentle as possible. Continuing on down, we relax all the muscles of our torso, whether it be our chest, trunk, or abdomen. Relaxing both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. until the whole of our body seems to melt away into the atmosphere around us, comfortable enough to allow us to forget about the body and turn our attention instead to the feeling inside us, inside the space of our body, where we can also spend a few moments to make sure our state of mind is as relaxed as our body. So ideally, our state of mind should feel awake and alert, but also relaxed. Picking up on the energy of solidarity with like-minded meditators in our group, because there's always a sharing of the inspiration to meditate that brushes off on all around us and gives us a sense of belonging. So at this point we can withdraw our awareness within the space of our own body to a place inside ourselves that feels free of any worries and concerns. Although there may be things going on in our busy lives, but we've set aside a special time for ourselves to recover and relax our sense of well-being. So we conjure up a sense of happiness, joy, and freedom in the mind, while putting aside any unwanted thoughts. And as we nurture the sense of happiness and joy inside ourselves, we allow that same feeling to grow and expand within ourselves until there's no space left in our mind for any other sort of thought. Ideally, we'll feel as if our whole body is light in weight, expanding, or as if it's disappeared altogether into the atmosphere around us. And at this point, for those of you who feel ready, you can start to practice your favorite method of meditation now that your body and mind are completely relaxed. But for those of you who are new to meditation or who favor the Dhammakaya approach, I'd invite you to imagine that inside your body is just an empty space or a hollow cavity with no organs or tissues, muscles or bones. Almost as if your whole body has been transformed into a hollow shell with nothing on the inside. In order to act as a sort of anchor for the mind, you might like to picture a bright object in your mind's eye, such as a full moon shining, a shining sun, maybe a twinkling star, or a sparkling diamond. And even if you can't directly see that object, you may find that the feeling of the presence of that object will work just as well. You may feel as if you have one of those objects floating within the space of your body. And at this point, you can allow the object to float gently down within the space of your body. Following the breath down to its deepest point at the diaphragm, a place known in this tradition as the seventh base of the mind. But in fact, anywhere in that general area which feels comfortable for you will work just as well. We maintain our mind in place lightly and gently by means of the inner object that we've imagined, as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, not letting our mind wander off anywhere else if we can help it. But if the mind should wander off, as inevitably happens, we just bring it back again each time to the center as before. And if the inner object disappears, then we can think of a new one. If we notice that thoughts interrupt our meditation, we do our best to ignore them rather than elaborate on them. But if we find the mind becomes plagued by thoughts, if we find our brain is working like the proverbial hamster wheel, we might find it useful to make use of a traditional mantra, such as hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up from the center of the body over and over again, until the mind starts to gain independence from those thoughts, until the spaces between the thoughts start to last longer than the thoughts themselves. In effect, the meditation is unique in the way over thousands of years it has contributed to human spirituality, culture, bringing a sense of grace and meaning to the lives of all who practice, while fostering honesty, compassion, and respect for all living beings. And in the present age, the need for humility and deep empathy are so essential for the well-being of all on our planet. So as we meditate today, we can make the resolve to ourselves to continue to work together to build the lives of peace and dignity for all on a healthy planet. There are so many benefits that arise from coming together to explore this shared spiritual path that can lead all practitioners to become free from suffering, while touching progressively upon an inner experience of enlightenment. And as we gradually shed the shortcomings from the mind, whether it be grasping, malevolence, or delusion, by letting go of the unmindful, the uncomprehending, the unconcentrated, residues of our wandering mind and faculties, as we move incrementally closer to that inner space of purity, we'll start to find that it doesn't actually matter what technique we started out with or where we meditate. But any place we practice meditation, even at home, even if we're unable to go to a meditation center in person, will help to bring ourselves closer to the seventh base of the mind, a point in the body which is a portal that leads the mind deeper towards wisdom. And any approach to the meditation that internalizes the mind within the body will eventually converge with that shared spiritual path. So ultimately they will all lead to inner wisdom. So at this point I'd like to encourage everyone to continue to practice meditation, keeping the mind on track lightly and gently, with our inner object at the center of ourselves, as we continue to focus the mind gently in peace at the center of the body for a few more moments until we come to the appropriate time. Sometimes when you're new to meditation, you may find that there are so many things popping up in the mind. It's as if its busyness never ceases. Sometimes like the ocean waves, one after the other, with those thoughts coming and going the whole of the time. But if we allow those thoughts to come and go, accepting that this is how the mind is, without getting worried or upset about it during the meditation itself, we'll find that the less we worry about it, the more we accept the reality, just acknowledging and bringing ourselves back to our meditational object, then we'll gradually become master of our own mind, rather than a slave to our own distractions. So if you find your mind is wandering off onto other things, each time you realize, you can just bring your attention back again to the center of the body as before. Bring our attention back to the center of the body for as many times as it takes to build up that sense of continuity between your awareness and that special place at the center of yourself. As you continue to cultivate the mind in this way, you'll find that the number of the thoughts becomes gradually less, with or without the mantra. You find the gaps between the thoughts gradually become longer, until the gaps between the thoughts become longer than the thoughts themselves. And you'll start to be able to see through to what lies beneath the thoughts in the mind, beneath that superficial layer of left brain thinking. You'll start to be able to access more intuitive places in the mind, a deeper level of the subconscious, gut feelings, inner wisdom, until you reach a point where the thoughts die down completely, and you'll start to have a permanent connection to those deeper gifts of the mind. But for now, we keep our mind on track, lightly and gently, keeping our mind in place with nothing more than a feather-light touch. Each to our own practice for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to time for some loving-kindness meditation. So we continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, always at the center of whatever inner experience we've built up for ourselves as a result of our meditation so far today. Whether it be in the form of a feeling of well-being at the center of ourselves, a sense of illumination within ourselves, or images within us, large or small. We place our mind gently at the center of that inner experience. And if we place our awareness exceedingly gently, there will be a sense of melting away, which allows that inner experience to spread outwards from the central point, almost like ripples spreading across the surface of a pond, around the place where a pebble has been thrown in, spreading in ever-widening circles from the epicenter. And in this way we spread positive peace energy from the center of ourselves, initially to fill the whole of our body, every fiber of our being, every cell and molecule of our body. And this process of spreading is known as loving kindness. And initially we extend a loving kindness towards ourselves with a sense of self-compassion, a love for who we are, at the very least a sense of acceptance and a sense of forgiveness. Because we need to love ourselves first before we can have love to share with others. Wishing ourselves to be well and happy, free from all suffering, before allowing that same spreading of loving kindness to extend beyond the boundaries of our own body, outwards into the room around us, almost like a halo or an aura, outwards towards other sentient beings, to the whole building. From there, radiating outwards into our entire neighborhood, with the positive intention as our loving kindness spreads to the living beings in our midst, sharing that state of peace and happiness as we let it grow further, expanding to the entire town and county, to all sentient beings or people, no matter where they are or who they might be, with a wish that all those living beings be touched by our loving kindness, our sense of love and compassion, which dispels all negativity, all the negative elements that affect the world, gradually disappearing as the loving kindness spreads further and further across the surface of our planet, above and beyond borders and boundaries, extending its warmth and compassion to every living being, every creature sharing this planet, with a tide of loving kindness, which you may experience as a sense of well-being or extending light that shines outwards from your center towards the whole of the world, to bring a state of happiness and contentment, with the wish that all sadness, sorrow, or aggression be swept away by the beauty of this compassion. Just like a single candlelight can be used to light many more candles until eventually the collected light becomes resplendent, dispelling darkness. In the same way, from one person or two spreading love and kindness, the tide of compassion, acceptance, peace, and harmony can become tangible in the same way. So we make the wish for ourselves and for all the sentient beings around us, that they may be touched by this sense of inner peace, love and compassion, that all their negativity be swept away. We can also extend loving kindness to particular loved ones, family members, relatives and friends, wherever they may be, whether they are still alive or whether they have already passed. Feeling them at our center and extending that energy of peace along with our loving kindness, along with our good wishes for them to be well and happy. We extend positive wishes for all without exception, with a sense of gratitude and appreciation, extending a sense of the light of peace and harmony throughout the world in this way for the last few moments of our practice together. สัมเพพุทธาปะละปะทาปะเจกานัญจยัมพลังอรหันตานัญจเตเจนะอระคัมบันทามิสัพพโสสัพพพุทธานุภาเวนะสัพพธัมมานุภาเวนะสัพพสังฆานุภาเวนะสัทธาโสธีภะวันตุเท So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. Meditation wasn't too long for you, just about right. Well, we gradually move in the direction of the subject matter for tonight's talk. And it's a continuation of a series of talks I've been doing on Buddhist character qualities or virtues, things to be cultivated, which form a sort of sequence from the more basic to the more transcendental. And the last time I saw you, we were talking about the quality of respect, or at least the attitude of respect. And today, we're talking about humility. Where this is going from here on in is a subject matter like contentment, gratitude, and it finishes up with effectively listening to Dharma teachings in a way that may give the listener benefit. So it's a sort of set of virtues which you might, in the present day, call something like soft skills, the sort of things which are very much in demand in the workplace for basically getting along with other people. So the theme picture I've chosen is of people all getting on together because of the humility which they have towards one another, which is the main reason for this skill being an important one at this point in the cultivation of the blessings of life. If you think about what is opposite to being humble, then probably you wouldn't be far wrong if you associated egotistical people with a lack of humility. The other sort of thing would be that of arrogance, or people being sort of puffed up with their own sense of self-importance. And in the Buddhist scriptures, they have a full list, if anyone's really interested, in the Mahanidesa of about 12 different things which tends to make people egotistical. But we'll look at just 6 today, namely our ancestry, our wealth, our physical attractiveness, and our knowledge, rank, or number of followers. Some people get quite arrogant as a result of their provenance, their family tree. They're born with a proverbial silver spoon in their mouth. They tend to think, I come from a large and influential family. I'm 10th in line to the throne. I'm descended from celebrities because my dad had a walk-on part in a Hollywood movie. So I can get away with anything. No one else can compare with me. And as a result of that sort of attitude, then the person looks down on everyone else they meet. However, in reality, coming from an influential family does nothing to guarantee that a person will have a bright future. In fact, it may even add to their woes because they may have a chip on their shoulder and find it quite hard, like the children of many of these so-called celebrities do, to establish their own independent reputation. So often you find that such people tend to be constantly name-dropping or using their parents' importance to cut corners, and eventually they end up with problems in life. As for wealth, some people think, I'm so rich, there's nothing that I couldn't buy, there's no reason I should show any deference to anyone else. And constantly they tend to look down on anyone else they meet. But in fact, even wealth doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a bright future. Just a few slip-ups with your tax returns, and you might become a pauper overnight. So even if you do manage to hang on to your riches to the end of your life, you can't take it with you when you go, which is sort of vaguely important to Buddhists, yes. So if you don't appreciate applying your wealth to cultivating sort of real good things to be proud of, then it will not help you necessarily to escape from suffering in life. And in effect, the richer you are, the more you have to worry about, because you will constantly be haunted by the fear that what you have will be stolen away or disappear. Being physically attractive, some people think, I look nicer than everyone else. My skin is unblemished. My nose shows breathing. I've got wonderful bone structure. Even Miss Universe will be jealous. So they tend to look down on everyone else. But in fact, an attractive appearance may not be a guarantee of a bright future. Some people might be attracted to you for all the wrong reasons, and even if you and your plastic surgeon manage to live to the age of 70, you can be pretty sure that those looks won't last. Some people become arrogant as a result of their education or their expertise. They think, I'm so great, I've got a master's degree, I don't need to listen to anyone else's advice anymore. So you look down on everyone else. But even academic knowledge doesn't guarantee a bright future. It may make you such a snob that no one will want to employ you. Some people think that rank or position makes them the greatest. Unfortunately, such ranks and positions come with responsibilities. So if you don't have the sort of virtues for fulfilling all those duties that come with a rank or title or whatever, then it can lead to your downfall as well. And in any case, at the end of your life, when you do go into retirement, then you'll be yet another has-been who has nothing to do but reminisce about your former glory. Number of followers, well, you cannot avoid thinking about the new generation of online influencers who tend to look down on people with less followers than them. But some people have got a lot of followers and nothing coherent to say. So if you're surrounded by huge numbers of followers who do nothing but agree with you the whole of the time, then that might also be your downfall, because you've got no one to be honest with you anymore about possible shortcomings which you have. And in the end, you may get no platformed, or you might get kicked off your social media network. So that would not end up well for you either. But the world tends to measure people's worth in terms of these 6 factors, even though common sense tells us that none of these things can really stay with us permanently. And most of them are not entirely within our own control. So if you base your opinion of yourself on these 6 things, then they are all rather fickle or rather unreliable. Really, if you want to know more about yourself and whether to be proud of yourself, then you ought to be more interested in comparing yourself today with maybe how you were yesterday. And that will give you more of a sense of perspective. And you ought to ask yourself whether looking down on other people actually helps anything in the world to become better. What do you gain by it? push people down so you look like you're a little bit higher up than them, perhaps. All you end up doing is having a whole lot of people who will never want to help you again a second time round. So it's not really a very sensible way to go around living with other people in society. And humility is something which, if you have it, then if you truly do have some things which are worth being proud of yourself for, then even if you get praise about that from other people, you don't let it go to your head, because you have a sense of perspective on what you have managed to master in your life and where you still have some work left to do. A lot of things with humility sound a bit like respect, which we talked about last time you saw me. And on the surface, respect and humility might look as if they are pretty much the same thing. So, like, why spend a whole another talk when we've already heard quite a lot about respect already? But really, respect is the quality which helps us to be more active in looking for the virtues contained in other people who we might meet. Yeah? Whereas humility is more to do with how we see ourselves in relation to those other people. So, if we think we are too great to learn anything new from anyone else anymore, that would be a lack of humility. Whereas respect may be to do with, in spite of how we see ourselves, we don't see any value in anyone else around us, for whatever reason. So humility is to do with not overestimating ourselves, leaving room for maneuver. You might be really good at something. You might be a champion tennis player. Pretty good, right? So does that mean that you should look down on everyone else? You might meet up with a champion cricket player. You still have something to learn from people, So you could be a champion in two different sports if you weren't so arrogant, for example. So what is the damage that comes from this arrogance that we're trying to do something about here? Often the sort of damage coming from arrogance can be talked about in terms of damage to yourself, damage to the people around you, and then damage to society at large. Damage to yourself, if you estimate your own worth too highly, then generally you think you're already good enough and you have no room for improvement. So you fail to do extra work on yourself as a result. Damage to others around you, it's often to do with how you treat other people, where you would tend to get touchy about trivial things, and it will lead to disagreements with other people because of the way you look down on them. It's often said, and this is a building in Seattle called the Rainier Building, if you're an arrogant person, you are rather like a building with a narrow foundation. You notice that in Seattle they have much taller buildings than that one. And in the same way, if you are an arrogant person, then you tend to be building yourself on rather a narrow foundation. You can never get very tall without toppling over. Yeah? And in the words of the founder of this tradition, who is a monk who we call Lumpu for short, he said that for a person to look down on others, even without realizing it, seeing others as weaker than oneself, speaking irreverently about them, is like stoking a fire which will spread from the lower stories of a building to reach even the rooftops. And in the same way, the resentment of junior people under your management, for example, can destroy a person who governs them, unless they are compassionate and wish only for the happiness of those who are working for them, who are less privileged than themselves. So for society at large, coming back to that picture again, if everyone is arrogant, everyone thinks they need to be made an exception for, then that will lead to breakdown of all sorts of law and order in society. It will lead to certainly disharmony and social instability, and in some cases vulnerability to colonization, rather like sandy soil, which, if there's a drought, will crack into clods of earth. But when the rain falls later on, it stays like that. Even though the rain may come later, it still stays in isolated clods, all separated from one another, because of the nature of the soil. This is the equivalent of a society of rather arrogant people, people who lack humility, who would disagree over small things, and then that they allow those things to separate them for good. However, if it's a clay soil, it may crack when there's a drought, but when the rain falls, then it all merges back together again. Yeah, so that is the equivalent of the humble people. And there's a story of the colonization of India, going back some years, where the nature of Indian society with the historic caste system was that it was very rigid in the way that upper castes would look down on lower caste people, and lower caste people actually didn't want anything to do with their higher caste people either. And when the British were on their doorstep, looking to sort of annex India for their own personal profits, then all the people in the upper classes thought, oh, well, doing something about this problem is beneath us. And all the people in the lower caste thought, well, if our whole country falls into the wrong hands, then that would teach those upper caste people a lesson. So the British usually have the policy of divide and rule anyway. So with a very small number of people, they actually managed to colonize the whole of India because of the underlying attitude of the people. I'm not saying it's the whole of the problem, but because the British actually did quite a lot of atrocities too, with somewhere between 35 million and 1.8 billion Indians dying of deprivation, for the British to take away 45 trillion of wealth over about 300 years of occupation. However, the tendency towards arrogance and disharmony did nothing to help the situation. Thailand, by comparison, is a little bit more humble in its attitudes towards one another in society. It's quite a sort of close-knit society by comparison, not so much in layers and classes or castes as India, and it was not colonized. And even if they have coup d'etat in Thailand, it tends to be bloodless. They sort of hand it over to whoever is the aggressor without too much fuss. That different nature of society. So, having looked at egotism and arrogance to some extent, the actual quality we are talking about, which I've called humility for this particular blessing, actually comes from the ancient Pali word nivata, which, if you break it down into its etymology, the ni bit means not or without. Vata means inflation with air. So basically, not puffed up or not inflated with your own self-importance. If you think about a toad which puffs itself up with air, then you can got a very good metaphor for what an arrogant person is rather like. And that is the opposite of that which we are trying to encourage by studying this blessing. The characteristics of humility generally. If you were to look into the mind of a humble person, then you would see characteristics of freedom from false views, self-pride, self-importance, stubbornness, and their mind, by contrast, would be rather workable and flexible and adaptable by contrast, not rigid. And it tends to come through in 3 different aspects of action, words, and thought. Humility in action may mean that people stick to well-mannered behaviors, and even physically they are quite flexible. You think about going to Japan, for example, where people really bow very low towards one another. Some people, if they are very rigid physically and unable to even show any sort of deference to anyone else, it's reflected in their whole posture sometimes as well. Words, not boasting or speaking provocatively, not putting others down verbally, being quick to apologize, and being gentle in the way you speak to other people, no matter who they might be. And even in one's way of thinking, not being complacent in the way you think, and also being open to other people's opinions. And today I'll finish off with a little bit of a story which comes from the time of the Buddha, which illustrates this point about arrogance as part of a culture being particularly damaging to the whole of a society. And just as a little bit of background, the Buddha actually came from a royal family, and his clan was called the Sakyan clan, so the clan of the Sakya family. And although the Buddha did all right for himself, I think you probably agree, but his family were well known for being pretty arrogant. So that's what he walked out of the palace to put behind him. And there was another royal dynasty who wanted to cement peace between the royal families by arranging a marriage. And the Sakyans themselves were so arrogant that they wouldn't even marry outside their own family. So when they had the request from another household, so this is the Kosalan family, to offer some sort of Sakyan maiden in marriage to one of their princes, they had a very difficult decision to make. And what they did was, I'll give you the picture, to send, instead of sending a real princess, they sent a illegitimate half-caste daughter born out of the relationship between the king, Mahanama, and a servant girl. So basically an untouchable caste, as it would be considered in India, because of a mixing of the 2 castes. So this, the king of Kosala didn't know about this, and he arranged a huge state marriage, and later a prince was born to the happy couple. And the prince was called Prince Vitutapa, you can see spelled out there. And he was very clever and also very healthy, maybe hybrid vigor you might call it. And as he grew up, he wanted to know about some of his maternal family. So he decided that he was going to go back and visit his hometown in Kapilavastu. And secretly they still looked down on that prince, because from their point of view he was born without proper provenance or whatever. And to his face, while he was visiting the town of Kapilavastu, they treated him in a well-mannered way. And once they'd all gone, then they all sort of forgot about him, so they thought. But one of the generals who was traveling with Prince Viduttappa, he'd forgotten something back in the palace at Kapilavastu. So he went back to look for it, and he found them all scrubbing the place down with milk, which is basically disinfectant in the old days. And he said, "Oh, why are you doing this?" And they said, "Oh, well, didn't you know that prince who just visited us now, he's actually an untouchable. And so we have to disinfect every place where he walked or sat during his visit." So the general went back and told the prince what he'd found, and the prince was so angry at how he'd been treated that he immediately wanted to declare war on that Sakyan clan. Fortunately, he asked the Buddha first, and the Buddha advised him not to be so extreme in his thinking, not to be so vengeful in his thinking. And in the beginning, the Kosalans followed the Buddha's advice. But once the prince came of age and he learned about how he'd been treated, he found it very difficult to take. And he actually gathered together his army on 3 occasions, but each time he was starting to go outside the gates of the palace, there would be the Buddha saying, don't let your views get the better of you. It's all down to a misunderstanding. So the Buddha did this 3 times. He was always there on this. It happened to be on a sand heap, it said, under a tree just outside the town. He always was there to dissuade Viduttappa from going to war. But on the 4th time, the Buddha realized that he could no longer hold back the karma which the Sakyans had basically fomented for themselves. So he could not help anymore, even though it was his own family who was being attacked in this particular case. And it turns out, although the Sakyans were extremely arrogant, but they were also extremely strict in their 5 precepts, especially the precept about killing living beings, which is not too great for a soldier, right? So all the Kosalans came and attacked the Sakyans. The Sakyans fired back, but they would not shoot to kill. They fired their arrows into wagon wheels, into turbans, into all sorts of things that wouldn't create any bad karma for themselves. They would prefer to die rather than break their 5 precepts. So basically they got slaughtered. And the only person left alive in the palace was the king who thought up the whole thing in the first place. And Prince Viduttappa said, keep him alive. I want to have one last meal with my uncle, or my father-in-law at least. And the King Mahanama was still so entrenched in his arrogance that rather than eat a meal with his son-in-law, he threw himself off the turrets of the castle into the moat below and drowned himself rather than eat a meal with his son-in-law. So entrenched were his views. So this is some of the social harm that can come from arrogance on the level of how a society is organized when it gets that bad, where there's whole sort of tribes and clans and no intermixing whatsoever, looking down on one another in such a way. So next time I will talk a little bit more about how humility can be cultivated. We know what to aim for now, we know how to avoid arrogance to some extent, but how to actually cultivate it will be a topic I will take up next time I see you, which I think will be on Tuesday. And for today, I just leave you with a few little announcements. Firstly, if you're new to meditation today and you found it was helpful, I would encourage you to meditate more, maybe in your own time at home, aiming for something like 20 minutes of meditation a day to start out with until it forms a daily habit in your lives, and then you can gradually extend the time as you find you have the inclination. If you are a little bit hazy on the meditation technique, you can find some guidance from the free app called MindGem, which you can download onto your mobile phone, and it has lots of audio tracks which you can follow along with of different lengths to guide your meditation and maybe find the approach to meditation that suits you the best. Here at the meditation center, we have classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Usually the Tuesday evening meditations are a little bit shorter, that's all. Thursday they're a little bit longer. And apart from that, we still continue to have teachings available via Zoom on Saturday evenings between 7 and 8 British time, where you can follow along with a meditation and a wisdom talk from a variety of teaching monks in our tradition. And for Thursday the 8th of December, we have our full moon, both online and in person here, on the theme of family harmony in the holiday season. And coming up at the end of the year, it seems to be a time when, if people have no free time during the entirety of the whole year, but they do have a little bit of free time at Christmas and New Year because they are forced not to work. Actually, we have a little informal retreat going on here as well over New Year. It's mostly for Thai people, but there have been quite a lot of English speakers who have signed up for it as well. So we are organizing a sort of dual-track retreat for that as well, where basically the day will be something like early morning meditation and chanting, evening meditation and chanting, and then during the day meditation and Dhamma talk in English, separate from the Thai people joining it. And it's generally quite a fun time to spend together. Lots of eats, at least for 2 meals a day, and also a countdown involving chanting and lucky dips and that sort of thing. Yes, so great fun. So for today, I think that's all the announcements I have for you, but if you have any questions, comments or feedback at this point, I'd be very glad to hear from you. May you all be blessed with happiness, success, and prosperity in life, be able to overcome arrogance with ease, and be able to cultivate humility now and forevermore.